you might have for me. Right, so let's start. FruitLook. What about FruitLook? The big thing about FruitLook is that we are here to support our farmers who want to farm as efficiently as possible. Let me just get my... Here we go. So what we're going to look at today is what exactly is FruitLook, how does it work, how is the data calculated, and then we're going to go through all the parameters. There's about 9 of them, and they're broadly categorized into 3 categories, and then we're going to look at how to use them as well, and then at the end we're just going to have a general Q&A if you have any further questions that I might have missed. So why would someone use FruitLook? So like I said earlier, it is a way, it's an additional layer of information that we provide to our producers so that they can make more informed decisions regarding their resource management, to help them improve their resource management, to help them improve their production, make it more even. And at the end of the day, what it's actually all about is to help them improve their water use efficiency. A lot of people think when you improve your water use efficiency, that means that you have to use less water. It's not necessarily that. Yes, that's one of the first things that we look at, but improving water use efficiency is not necessarily using less water, but using it more effectively by timing your irrigation or delivering it at a different frequency and timing as well. So one thing that we have to get out of the way is the name. The name is a bit of a misnomer. Even though it says FruitLook, it's not just for fruit. If it's green and it grows, we can measure it. So you can use FruitLook for any green plants matter that you want, whether it's pastures, olives, vegetables. Even if you want to measure a piece of natural vegetation that was maybe destroyed by veld fire, or how the veld recovers after removal of invasives, grains, tobacco, the forbidden plant, tea, anything basically, you can use FruitLook on. So it originally started with irrigated agriculture, but we have so many other parameters that you can still use it for non-irrigated agriculture as well. So don't limit yourself to what it was originally intended for. It kind of expands as we get new uses for it. So the big thing about FruitLook is that it is free. Actually, this year, FruitLook has been going for 10 years and has been 10 years subsidized by the Department of Agriculture, Western Cape. So how the program works, FruitLook is a product that was developed by a Dutch company called eLeaf, and it is 100% subsidized by the Department of Agriculture, Western Cape, and the implementation partners of it is Blue North Sustainability. So I work for Blue North Sustainability, and we're here to support our farmers. Some of you, I joined Blue North in October last year, but some of you might know me from before that. I was adopted with the program. So yes, so that's where the 3 companies come together when it comes to FruitLook. So the thing with FruitLook data as well, a lot of people think that it's pure satellite data. It is not. It is satellite derived data. And like I said, it's in 3 broad categories. And what's nice about FruitLook is it provides you data on a weekly basis. Our seasons start from the beginning of August till the end of July. So it's 52 weeks of the year. But we have only been having a full year's data since 2018 season. Before that, it was 9 months. And I think from 2015 earlier, it was 7 months of data. So it depends on what area you are. And if you're in our areas where we first started out, you can get historical data as far back as 2010. Now that sounds impressive and very nice and all, but if you don't know what happened in those earlier years, that historical data is not going to mean much to you. You're going to have what the weather data was like, when did you do what management practices to understand what the data is telling you. So that whole area, which is this orange border here, this is the whole area that we cover. That's 9.5 million hectares in total. I think it covers about 200 million hectares of fruit that was planted. But we cover this whole area, whether you're in the mountain or anything. You'll see it basically excludes the Groot Karoo, but the rest of the province is in there. So it's a once-off registration, and then you select your blocks. That first step is the one that is the most time, it might take the most time out of your day. But the thing is, every year, you just reorder the data. It's not that you have to redraw your blocks every year, you just reorder the data. So it takes a little effort to get started. Well, it's not that much effort. And then it just keeps working for you. And every year that you order new data, you build your historical database. Just to give you an idea how we expanded. So this year on the right-hand side was the 16-17 season. We expanded in a bigger area. So just to go back, that's basically that area there. So when we expanded this area in the 17-18 season, we almost doubled it. It was 5.6 million hectare. And then we doubled it to 9.5 million, well, almost doubled it. So everything from about Robertson eastwards, you will only get data from the 2017-18 season. And before that, we still paid for satellite data, so it was very fragmented. So this was during the 2014-15 season. It was very fragmented because we paid for the satellite data and for the processing. And then during that season, the publicly accessible data was made available. So we could, the next year, we could do a much larger area for the same price, basically, because now the price goes more into the processing and not so much into acquisition of the data. So, like I said, it's not pure satellite data. We get satellite data. We have about 5 different satellites and sensors that we work with, and they send us various images in different bands. Then we pull in geographical data and weather data. And we have 3 sources of weather data that we use. We first start with the ARC weather stations, and where there are no ARC weather station or confidence has been lost in that ARC station, we use Hortec weather stations. We buy data in from Hortec. Where there is no Hortec data, where there's no Hortec weather station or ARC weather station, we use the weather database from NOAA, NOAA, so that we can cover the entire area with weather data. Then the only information that we get from the website itself is those boundaries that you've drawn in as your fields. So we use that field shape that you've drawn in almost as a cookie cutter. So we process that whole 9.5 million hectares and we take your field as a cookie cutter and we give you your data. That's why you can call it guavas or cherries or wine grapes, even though it's a field of pastures, and you'll get the exact same data. So there's no way for a farmer to manipulate that data. And then we come to this step here. That is where me and you come in at the end of the day, is what do we do with that data? Data means nothing if you can't transcribe it into usable information. So what does that data mean? And how can we use that information to help us improve our yield, to save money, and at the end of the day, if possible, to save water, to up that water use efficiency? Now, we did a survey and we are going to launch it actually today, another survey, because we did that one about 4 years ago, where we asked people, if you had to think about just FruitLook, how much would you say you've saved water by just using FruitLook? And they indicated anything between 5 and 15%. Now, if we take the low value, let's lowball it and say 5%. That doesn't sound like much if you look at the monetary value of water. But if you look at how much it costs to pump that extra 5% water, it touches your electricity bill quite hard. So even if we can make those small little changes, it makes a big difference. So yeah, keep an eye out for our new survey that we're launching. It's going to go for a while, and you could be, you can stand in line to win a lucky draw, but take a lot voucher. Yay. So yeah, even just with the 5%, it does make a difference. It just ups your profit margin ever so slightly, and no one will say no to an increased profit margin at the end of the day. If you have any difficulty, even after this training, while looking at your data and you're not sure, or you just want to bounce ideas off of me and kind of benchmark yourself if you're interpreting the data correctly, please give me a call, email, WhatsApp, whatever platform you work on. I'm all of them. And I can help you interpret that data and make sure that you're interpreting it correctly. So let's look at how it works. So I cheated a little bit. This is not a satellite image photo. It's from a drone, but it falls under remote sensing. So it's same. So this is a photo that was taken in Israel. And what we can see here is what's called the visible spectrum. And that's the spectrum that us humans can see in. And if you look on the electromagnetic spectrum here at the bottom, it's quite a small part that we can sense with our eyes. And if we look at this vineyard here, we see in the back there's some olives, it's wine grapes, and then here's a little block of citrus as well. And if I look at those orchards, it doesn't look like there's many differences, but the satellites, they're constantly going over in different orbit cycles. They have all these multi-spectrum cameras on them that can take photos in different bands of the electromagnetic spectrum, from UV right through to infrared. And we then take that data and provide it in a pixel format of 20 by 20 meters. But let's just take one of these bands. Let's do the infrared one. We as humans can't see infrared, but we can feel it as heat on our skin. That's how we can sense it. And if we put that over, all of a sudden the picture changes. First of all, we see that there is some variation here in this vineyard that wasn't here previously. Also, the olives are a lot cooler. Even the citrus as well. Now, this can be due to many reasons. So the olives being cooler there could be because of their morphology. They've got little trigomes or hairs on their leaves that is there to reflect light away, so it doesn't absorb as much heat. That's why they are adapted for these extreme temperature areas. Citrus, big dense leaf canopy, lots of transpiration taking place. That transpiration does have an evaporative cooling effect, hence why you'll see it goes cooler as you go closer to the center, where it creates this little microclimate. But here in the vineyards, it's interesting. There's a block there, and it looks like there's a block there. And the only way to describe that is a soil difference, where that soil might be a little denser, have a higher water holding capacity, which means that vineyard can keep pulling water from the soil and keep transpiring, which then creates almost the pseudo cooling effect at the end of the day. So that's a difference that we could not see previously. If I take that image off, there's no way, you can't even see really that big of a growth difference in there. But all of a sudden, it gives you this different layer of information. Now, that's exactly what FruitLook does. It gives you a layer of information in a whole different spectrum, which you can't see. It's not that you'll always be able to do something about it, but being aware of that variation can help you manage it. If you know that that area is has got a lot denser soil, then you know that is the first one that will be susceptible to over irrigation or something like that. So just be aware of variation, and that's one of the key things that FruitLook does. Let's quickly look at all the different the data sets that we have. So the first one is what we call the growth data products, and we start with biomass production. That is measured in kilograms per hectare per week. And you'll see it's depicted here by this red line. So how we calculate that is it calculates all the growth that took place that week. So it's not total biomass, it is what has been produced that specific week. And it includes everything above ground and below ground growth. And it's not just your crop that's standing there, but everything that stands in that field. So that is your weeds, your cover crop, and your trees or vines or whatever you have in there, everything. So you have to be aware that if you go through with, let's say, a slasher or a bossikaper, that's going to give a dip in your biomass production. Not because you removed biomass, but because you tipped off the growing points, which inhibited the potential growth. So it needs to create a new growth point before it can continue growth. So it'll make a little bit of a dip there. It's the same with if you prune or if you break out leaves or anything like that, or if you spray plant growth regulators, something like regardless, your biomass production will then go down because you are effectively decreasing your biomass production. So that is biomass production. You can almost look at it as your growth tempo. As it goes up, it means you have a higher growth tempo. As it goes down, it means you have a lower growth tempo. If it drops to 0, it means that you didn't have any new growth that specific week. It is very rare, but it does sometimes happen with, I've seen it in millies where that happens. In your tree crops, very seldomly it will do that. So the next one of our growth data products is the vegetation index, or NDVI. As any of you, raise your hand if any of you have ever worked with NDVI before or have heard of NDVI. Okay, we've got one. Okay, so not a lot of people have worked with NDVI before. So NDVI stands for Normalized Differentiated Vegetation Index. And it doesn't have a unit attached to it. It works on a scale between 0 and 1. But for a planted area, it will never go to 0 and will never be 1. So it always will be between 0.25 and 0.85. And how it works is the higher the value, the denser your canopy, but also the healthier your canopy is. So you can see it as an indication of vigorous growth and strong and healthy growth. And then when we look at the next one, which is the leaf area index, and that is how much square meter leaf area there is per square meter soil area. They cancel each other out. So the higher value you have there, the denser your canopy is. You can look at it that your leaf area index is almost like the capacity of your solar panel. The more leaf area you have, the more capacity you have to absorb the sunlight for photosynthesis and potential growth. So the reason why we have the vegetation and the leaf area indexing is because the vegetation is basically canopy and canopy health. If you get a drop in your vegetation index and you look at your leaf area indexing and you did not see a drop in your leaf area indexing, then you know that that vegetation index drop might be due more to metabolic stress and not so much removal of the leaf canopy. That's why we put those two together. And while biomass production is a weekly parameter, in other words, you only get one data point per week, the vegetation index and the leaf area indexing are instantaneous data sets, which means that it's not calculated. It is a snapshot that's taken on a specific day at a specific time as the satellite moves over. There's two satellites, Sentinel-2A and B, and they each have orbit between 3 and 5 days, and they're running concurrently like this. So whenever they come over and there's no cloud cover, they take a snapshot at that specific time, and then you'll have your dates there. If you attend the third section, you'll see how the graphs differ because of the dates that are a lot more erratic with the vegetation and the leaf area indexing compared to the biomass production. Then there's a fourth growth data product that is not included on this graph. It's called the cumulative biomass production. So that is just every week's biomass production added together. What is nice about that data set is that at the end of the season, when you look at your spatial map, you can then see where's my truly vigorous growing areas and where's my truly weaker areas. Then you can go investigate to see why is it so much vigorous here, or why is the growth not as healthy as it is in that area? Is it something that I can do about it, and is it economically viable to change it or not? So that is, I like that parameter for like a post-season evaluation. Right. If we look at our water data products, so our 4 products that most people use is the biomass production and then the 3 water products, and I'll show you why. Oh, I feel a hiccup coming on, so excuse me if I catch a hiccup. Okay, so the first one when it comes to the water data products is the actual evapotranspiration. Now, evapotranspiration is a combination of 2 words: evaporation, transpiration, poop, evapotranspiration. And that is how much water was physically used and or lost in that field for that specific week. And we measure that in millimeters per week. So it's also a weekly data set. Now, with the actual evapotranspiration, you can't use more water than what is available. And that is where the ET deficit comes in. If there is a deficit of available water, then your ET deficit will climb. And how we calculate the ET deficit is we have this actual evapotranspiration, which is an actual value, and then we have a potential evapotranspiration, which is more of a theoretical value. And we calculate this potential evapotranspiration of how much water would have been used if I had optimal growth under optimal growth conditions. And then the deviation between this potential and the actual, that is seen as your ET deficit. So ET deficit can indicate under irrigation, but it can also indicate just a deviation from optimal growth conditions. If you had a particularly windy week, or very hot weather, the stomata of the leaves close and you don't get any transpiration because the plant is trying to sell itself. Even if there's enough water in the soil, it's not going to transpire. So because of that lack of transpiration, you're going to start developing an ET deficit. So that's why you have to keep record of what happens every week to make sense of the data. Because if you look at it in hindsight, you might think, oh no, I didn't give enough irrigation water. But if you constantly monitor your soil and look at FruitLook data and at weather data, then you can say, no, I had enough water in the soil. It was just particularly windy and very hot. That's why I got an ET deficit. So you'll see there in the graph there at the bottom, it goes, you want it as low as possible to zero, and every now and then you can have a spike. That's for those unfavorable weeks that come by. What you don't want is for it to climb from week to week. If it starts climbing from week to week, then you know there's something seriously wrong. But a week here where it just spikes and comes back down is not the end of the world. That's actually fine. If you have probes, and I know that a lot of people have probes, you'll see that your ET deficit might sometimes not even bounce at all during the season. And the reason for that is probes is a lot more reactive, and it gives you a daily value, even an hourly value. So you've got a lot more tighter control on your irrigation, which might then not lead to an ET deficit. And the other thing I wanted to make, remember this ET deficit is calculated on transpiration. Now what happens is when a plant stresses, especially your fruit trees, is that it will negatively affect the fruit before it negatively affects the growth. So that's why you can't just use FruitLook on its own. You have to use FruitLook with other tools and physical observations as well to see what works for you and what is your benchmark value. And where must I start panicking? Some people can have an ET deficit of 10 millimeter and there's no hiccup. Other people have a 2 millimeter deficit and everything just falls flat. So you have to look at what is a good value and what is a bad value for you. Not just with ET deficit, all of these parameters actually. Right, so that is the ET deficit. You can see that basically as a plant water stress component. The biomass water use efficiency is just where we take the biomass that was produced that specific week per unit of water. So we take the actual evapotranspiration measured in millimeters and we just kind of transpose it to cubic meters. So it's a value of whatever kilograms per cubic meter of water. So what we found actually is that blocks with higher biomass water use efficiency, that's basically the same, that's the same cultivar rootstock, everything like that, tend to have a higher yield at the end of the day. But try to compare the same block over different years, or if it's the same block, cultivar rootstock kind of soil, climatic conditions, everything the same, and if their biomass water use efficiencies differ, you'll see that the one with a higher biomass water use efficiency tend to have a higher yield. Maybe slightly, maybe a lot, but that's the closest we could get to a parameter that was quite linked to yield. The reasoning behind is that a healthy plant has a good biomass water use efficiency. So it's just, well, the word is everything. It's just so efficient in using that energy and photosynthesizing and to create that sugars to put it into your fruit at the end of the day. And also, we're looking at biomass water use efficiency. Your fruit, if you look at it, the biomass of a tree, it's a very small component. So if your biomass water use efficiency drop, but you know that your growth, your active growth is stopped and the tree is now more focusing its energy on the fruit, then don't worry about it because you know what's happening in the physiology of your fruit. Of your fruit tree. So take note of that as well. So that is our water data products. If we move over to our mineral data products, there's two. And there's only just nitrogen. So the first one is nitrogen in the upper leaf layer, and that's measured in kilograms per hectare. And then we have the second one, which is the total plant nitrogen, which is also measured in kilograms per hectare. But when they say total plant, it's actually not total plant, it's just the above ground growth. And how we do that is we take the upper leaf layer nitrogen and we take the leaf area indexing and we basically build a 3D model. So the thing is, it measures the nitrogen based on the chlorophyll content. The parameter is called NDRE. So it's normalized differentiated red edge effect. And the idea behind it is that the head of a chlorophyll molecule is a magnesium and 4 nitrogens. And when you have some form of chlorosis, that is due to a nitrogen deficiency. Now, there are quite a few things that can cause chlorosis, not necessarily nitrogen. So when we tested these nitrogen parameters with leaf samples, we found 0 correlation, nada. But one of the consultants I spoke to said he saw something very interesting, but it's very anecdotal and it should still be tested, is he found that he tests a plant sap, he does plant sap analysis, and he said with that nitrogen content, the pattern kind of runs parallel. So that would actually be interesting to see how our nitrogen parameter links to something like plant sap analysis. So that is still something that we can have a look in. But with regards to leaf samples, it doesn't fit at all. Now people ask me, okay, so what can I use it for? If I can't use it for fertilizer recommendations, what can I use it for? So the total plant nitrogen map is still useful. And you can see where there's really low spots and really high spots, and it can indicate where you need to go investigate. To see why does it give such a big discrepancy? Is there maybe something else that might be wrong with it? So it's not completely useless. It is just, you just use it in a different way. So when we click on a name and the map opens up, you'll see that it gives you a change in time, which will be that graph, but it also gives you a change in space. And that is those spatial maps that we get. So what it does with every single dot on that graph is represented by a map at the bottom. So if the dot is highlighted, that means that that is the average value of all the values in that pixel map at the bottom. And like I said, that data is created on a weekly basis without any input from the farmer. So there is no way that you can manipulate this data to make it either look better or better for yourself. It is what it is. It's one of those things. If you do notice that our data does not correspond at all with what you see physically, please let us know and we'll investigate it to see if something went wrong or if it's just a matter of interpretation of the data. But the thing is, it must make sense to you, and you'll see if you are in the field on foot level there, about 99% of the data that you see there, you will be able to clarify you'll be able to quantify why it is the way it is. If there's something that you can't put your finger on, why would the data jump or why would the data drop, give us a call and we'll help you figure that out. Art, for our artistic people here, who of you know who Paul Cézanne is? I'll give you a tip. He's from Paris and he's a postmodernistic artist. He's considered the father of postmodernistic art, and Picasso drew a lot of inspiration from it. But it is important what we see here because it actually relates to FruitLook data. If we look at this portrait here, it's called Dish of Apples, very original. If I had to ask you, why did he put this dish of apples on a white cloth and not directly on the brown table? And also, this brown and green colors here, is that russeting or is it mold or what is it that's there? So this is the stem end. I think that might be russet, but I have never seen russeting from the blossom end of an apple before. And I think you ran out of apples because this one looks like a mango. But the point is, when you look at this, it's all about contrast and context. So the whole point of why he put it on the white cloth and not directly on the brown table is to get contrast from the brown. The red and the brown is too close to each other. So he needs to get contrast. It's the same reason why he made the cabinet in the back that blue color. It just makes everything pop. And where the context comes in is we don't know the context of what these colors mean on these apples. Is it russeting? Is it mold? We don't know. Maybe it's a cultivar, an old cultivar that doesn't exist anymore. So it's all about context. And it's exactly how you have to look at FruitLook data. You might see these massive contrasts, but you have to look at those contrasts in context to the legend at the bottom. So that color scale legend keeps changing based on the values that you have. And if all the values are quite close to each other, it's going to spread it out over that whole color scale, and it's going to make it look like you've got massive differences. But go look at what the legends say at the bottom. Never just look at the colors, because the colors change from week to week. And that is your art lesson for FruitLook. Okay, let's look at how to use FruitLook. There are three big ways to use it, and they all kind of link to each other. So the first one is we need to understand what our data mean and how to interpret it, and then how to use it. Then we take that information and integrate that into our plan for the season. Then as the season progresses, we can use FruitLook that gets updated on a weekly basis to then monitor our progress and our current growth, and then to hopefully identify problems before they become too big. And then as the season goes on and eventually ends, then we can go and have a look at the whole season as a whole. And then we can go evaluate and go compare good blocks with bad blocks, good years with bad years. And then we take that knowledge that we've gained and we integrate that back into our plan for the next season. And so the cycle continues. And that's how you use FruitLook. So when we want to plan and understand for the season, we have to, like I previously said, what do these values mean? And what do they mean for me? There are no standards when it comes to FruitLook of this is a good value for a pear block. This is a bad value for an apple block. You can only compare yourself with yourself because there's so many variables that has an effect on your growth. And what could be a good value for you might be a bad value for someone else. So only compare yourself with yourself. So if you can, load historical data, but make sure that you do have some form of a record for that historical data as well. Then you can use it to even see how much water does my crop use and how much water does it really need. And then compare that to what my irrigation is, and do those two link up with each other. You can even use the spatial maps to check where to place probes, or if you already have probes, to just check, is the place that I have selected for the probe the best possible place for that specific probe? A probe is great, but it means absolutely nothing if it's not in the right place. So that's why it's so important to make sure that your probes are placed in the correct spot. Then you can look at how to harvest or sample. If you have a lot of variation, if you are cursed with some of those soils that there's like 10 different soil types in like a 2-hectare block, then you must kind of look at practicality and to see, must I kind of divide this block into different zones and make sure that I harvest from each zone or sample from each zone? And should I manage this block as a big unit, or must I just manage it into smaller units? And then you can look even at your effectivity, your yield, your water use, things like that as well. The monitoring, that is during the season. That's where you pop up once a week on FruitLook. Let's say on a Friday morning. That's actually the best time because our data gets loaded on a Thursday afternoon, evening. So just quickly look through that My Fields overview list and just check if there's any, what's that, uitsketer? Yeah, my English is failing me this morning, eh? To look for any discrepancies in the data, or if there's any any outliers in your data. So that's why we say it's so important to name your blocks cultivar first and then a block number, because you expect your cultivars to kind of react the same way. So it's easier to spot if there's any discrepancies. This weekly monitoring should not take you more than 5 minutes. If you use more than 5 minutes, you're doing it wrong. So the reason behind it is to look for any outliers. If there is a possible outlier, then just quickly go investigate it, 1 or 2 blocks, then you move on with your day. So it's to see if you're doing well or not. So the big thing that people use there is the basically those four: growth and the three waters, mostly the growth and the ET deficit. That's the first one people look at. Then you can also use the data curve. So every 2 to 3 weeks, I would draw in a couple of graphs to just see if they're all still running parallel to each other, to see if there are any temporal changes and deviations. Now we can see here in this graph here, they were kind of all together, and then all of a sudden this one just dropped significantly, and it just never recovered completely. Could we have intervened here at a much closer stage and got it closer? Possibly. So it's easier to kind of rectify problems as they happen, rather than looking back on the season and say, oh, we should have, could have done that. One of those things. So yeah, that's how you can look at it. Or if there's something wrong with your data that you can't explain, do a field analysis, where you pull up your fields like this. They then all go on the same legend, and then you can pick up if there's any spatial variations or changes that might have taken place. For instance, here we see this block is quite even. All of a sudden, it's like it's divided in half, and then it kind of equalized. What happened that week? Did it maybe happen that the valve of the other tap didn't open, and only the one side got irrigation, not the other side? Normally, if a problem is in a straight line, it's mostly man-made. There are very few straight lines in nature. So if it looks like it's a straight line, a problem that arises, it's most likely a man-made issue. Sand filter that's blocked, pipe that's blocked, valve that didn't open. What else can it be? If you applied one sort of a treatment to only one block and not the others, like let's say you didn't have enough mulch to mulch all your blocks and only mulched half a block or something like that, that can all lead to straight line changes. So here's an example of how to identify under irrigation. So the first thing is we always start with the biomass production because it's an indicator of your growth tempo. If something's wrong with your biomass, then you start moving and investigating in your other data sets. So when we look at this biomass production, we see there's about 3 weeks in December, early Jan, that it just dropped significantly from quite high values to almost none, to very little. So the first culprit we draw in when we see biomass production drop is our good old friend ET deficit. And when we pulled that over, we see that those exact same 3 weeks where the biomass production dropped, we had a significant increase in our ET deficit there. I mean, yeah, so that's what, high 20s to about almost 35 millimeter deficit in December. That is pretty much almost all of your water. I don't know how they dried that block out so badly and who volunteered to have their block tortured like this. But yeah, and you see it correlates quite well. This is like a textbook example of under irrigation. Because the ET deficit just super high there, where your biomass production is low. If we look at something like over irrigation, and this is something we saw quite a lot, and where we picked it up is actually during the drought, where when people started making significant changes to their irrigation to adapt to the low amount of water that they have available, we saw that the 2015-16 season and the 14-15 season especially, a lot of people over-irrigated. But it was that level of over-irrigation where you didn't see that much of a physical effect, you were just wasting water. So if we look at it, we see again here with the biomass production, it took a dip. So the first thing what we do, we go look at ET deficit. He's always our first culprit to go look at. And then we see the ET deficit made a slight blip, but it's like 1 millimeter per week. It's not really significant for that period. So it's definitely not the ET deficit. Then the next data set that we move on to investigate is the biomass water use efficiency. So when we draw that in, we see that during that period, of the low growth, there was a decrease in the biomass water use efficiency, which is and can be an indicator of over irrigation. And the reason why and how you pick it up is because the biomass water use efficiency, you can look at it as a relation between evaporation and transpiration. If the value goes lower, it means you have a higher component of evaporation versus transpiration. And you want your water to be used effectively, so you want more transpiration than evaporation. So when that relationship starts skewing, that's when your biomass water sufficiency start going down. And that's how you pick up over irrigation. So what we then tell people, if they have that level of over irrigation, is cut your irrigation with 5% and then keep an eye on it for about 3 weeks to see if it does pick up or if your ETE deficit starts making a blip. But don't be stupid about it. Don't do it in a sensitive stage of development like flowering or fruit set or something like that. You don't want to stress your plants then. Or either just make a note of it and then do it the next year. And if it still doesn't make a blip, cut it with another bit and just keep adapting it. Because remember, the seasons aren't the same from year to year. You have to constantly adapt. You have to look at what it was, look what the next week's forecast will be, and then predict it based on that. But look at if you can cut it and where you can cut it. Or what happens is, it could be that if you have something like this, where you see that your biomass water sufficiency goes down, but you know that you use evaporative cooling for sunburn control, then you can explain why you have that. So if you have micro sprinklers and you do put them on during very hot parts of the season to create that little microclimate, push up the humidity, that's the whole point of putting them on, is to create that higher moisture content, and you can only do that through evaporation. So that would explain then why you have a biomass water sufficiency drop then, because you are pushing up the evaporation, but it's for a purpose. So don't just chase straight numbers. Look at what your production practices is. Look at the effect that it gives you. And if it's economically viable to do it, then continue with it. If you have the water available, do it if it works for you. So yeah, just always be aware of what your values is and compare to what you're actually doing on the ground. And those two need to link with each other. If they don't link, then there's faults. Then we have to start investigating. So this is an example of how you can actually calculate what your actual crop water requirement is. So you'll see there we have what we call an ET minimum and an ET maximum. So the ET minimum is calculated from that specific week's actual evapotranspiration, And your ET max will then be your actual evapotranspiration plus your ET deficit. So in other words, your potential evapotranspiration. So what that then gives you, if you count up your whole season, is like a bottom and top margin that you have to work with. Now, this will only be applicable for one season. If you do it for a couple of seasons, then what you can do is you can calculate an average water requirement for that specific block. And so either cultivar and rootstock combination. So if you want to start, if you want to expand your operation and you want to plant another block, then you can look at, okay, what water capacity do I have left over, and which one of these cultivars will give me the highest income per millimeter, or the highest yield per millimeter, or something like that. You can work that out and use any of those type of parameters that you want. To then use that for those type of calculations. And you can, if you work out your water requirement, you can even work out your own yield water use efficiency. Sometimes the block will have a low biomass water use efficiency, but if you look at its yield water use efficiency, it's a lot higher. I think, yeah. So actually, see now, one of the people that's on it, at this webinar today, we've actually done that with their products. As we looked at the biomass water use efficiency, but then also at the yield water use efficiency. And that was very interesting how big of a discrepancy there actually is. Because remember, you don't harvest the full biomass, you harvest just a small component of the biomass. If you have something like, what is kuilvoer? Silage. If you make something like silage, that is where you're actually harvesting all the biomass, well, 2/3 of the biomass. But that would actually be quite interesting to see how that would correlate to our biomass calculations as well. Okay, Okay, so let's see how you can pick up variations in the spatial deviation. We can see here in this olive block, we have the normal variation, then all of a sudden, there's that red blip in there. Now those pixels are 20 by 20 meters, which means there was very little to no growth in a 20 by 20 meter zone, which is quite a lot. So I don't know what happened there, but this is exactly how you use FruitLook. Is you'll always see variation. So you have to know your blocks first, study them, know them, become familiar with them. And then if one is not like the other, then you know there's something wrong. And then you can go investigate and see, why is it not like the other? FruitLook will never tell you what is wrong. It will just tell you something's not right. But it can't say it's pest, it's disease, it's too little irrigation. You still have to go investigate. So FruitLook isn't there to replace anything. FruitLook is an additional layer in your toolbox that you can use to help you manage your farm as efficiently and effectively as possible. So now we get to our last step, which is our evaluation. And this is where we start looking at our problems and successes. Now we can do our different years. If you have historical data, we can look at our different years. We can compare a good year with a bad year. We can compare a certain block over different years. Or we can even compare our good blocks with our bad blocks. Or if you had a block that these two were very similar last year, and all of a sudden this year, this one is a little lower. Why is it lower? What did we do? Did something go wrong? Is it something that we can change, or what happened in there? Then we can even evaluate our management practices, look at your yield versus water use, yield versus growth, and even look at your fertilizer application. Could you make that variation that you saw earlier in the season, could you up it and make it more even, or is it still a problem? Is there something you can do about the variation, yes or no? And then one of the big things is, a lot of the older farms is these blocks have been laid out many years ago, and sometimes they're quite large, and people still manage them as these large units. And then if we look at FruitLook and there's very big discrepancies, you must start asking yourself, will it not be more precise or efficient to manage them into smaller blocks? Let's say you have an 8-hectare block planted, there's 4 taps in that thing, but you have a lot of variation in them. Should I not manage them as, instead of block 7, call it block 7A, B, and C and D? And maybe only run these 2 taps together and those 2 taps on their own schedule because of the variation that you get in it. Yes, it's going to cost you a lot more management, but that's the thing. If you want to be more precise, it's going to up management time. So that's why I say, with all of these changes, there's a lot of things that you can change when you want to go to precision level, and you can go as small as you want on precision level, but you have to look at what is economically and practically viable for you. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. So look at what is possible. Can I manage it in smaller zones or not? And if you can, see if that makes a difference. If you do it for a couple of years and you see it doesn't make a difference, it just costs you effort and time, then go back to having it to one big zone. That's the whole thing of FruitLook. It just helps you to manage it, to manage the decisions, or to monitor the decisions that you made. Did it work? Did it not work? Is there something we need to change? Just help you with that monitoring situation. So if you want more information and what all of these data sets mean, you can always click on our homepage. There's these tabs called growth, moisture, minerals. You can click on those and it will link you to old newsletters where we broke down all the different parameters. So you can go study that. We're also currently busy with our YouTube channel, where we're making short videos on not just how to use the website, but what different parameters mean, how you can use it for different things as well. We're currently almost posting like a video a week, so keep an eye out for that. You can just look for us, FruitLook team, under YouTube, but I'll also post it on our Facebook page as the videos get released. So you can go read on the website itself, or if you're a more visual person and you want to watch a video, then wait a little longer. Or call me, WhatsApp me, SMS me, email me, Zoom me, MS Teams me. I'm on all the platforms, even Skype. Or if we can come into contact with people again one day, it will be so weird. We do I don't know if we're going to present any more physical trainings at our office here at Klein Joostenberg, in my lonely office where I'm sitting now. Or we've got this webinar series that you're currently attending, or we can come to you. But what we're currently doing is we're trying to minimize contact with people. So if you do want a consultation, let's try online consultation first. It's a good practice session for everybody. If you even struggle with the technology, I'm even there to help you to set everything up, just to use these technologies as well. We have 2 tech coaches, so it's me, and if you attended the first one, you would have met Bianca. We can assist you with any of these things. You can subscribe to our newsletter. We've had multiple articles over the years in the Fruit Journal, Wine Magazine, Water Wheel, all of them. Or you can just email us at info@fruitlook.co.za, or what you can do is you can email us individually as well. So there's all my contact details if you have any further questions and you want to contact me on it. Yeah, I think that is it for me for today. Is there any further questions that you guys want me to answer, or on all of these details? I know it's a lot of information, but what I would recommend is go home and kind of digest it. Go play around with your own data, and then you can come back to me with more questions. Okay, so no questions from anybody for now? Okay, then that is me for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this webinar, and I hope you have a lovely day further. And if you're attending the 3rd session, I will see you now in a couple of minutes. Go make a quick cup of coffee, and then we'll see each other now. Thank you so much for attending, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.